Today on Doomed! As the coronavirus continues to spread throughout the United States and really the world, we're going to be taking a look today on Doomed with Matt Binder on what white nationalists are doing right now. I mean, the whole world has turned to coronavirus, and rightfully so. But here on this show, where we cover the far right, we're going to make sure that the white supremacists, the neo-Nazis, and even the militia groups aren't escaping the scrutiny that they well deserve. And we're really going to be going into what they're basically doing, because quite frankly, they're taking advantage of the coronavirus pandemic right now. We'll go through how they've changed their views, at least some of them have, and where they've decided to basically pivot to in the coronavirus, I guess, industry we have now, being that the pandemic has taken over every facet of our lives. And joining me to do that, let me bring us up here on the YouTube stream, is Devin Burghart. He's the president of the Institute for Research and Education on Human Rights. He's been tracking the far right for a long time, which makes him quite welcome on this show. And we'll actually talk about how he got involved in all this. As I was telling him earlier when we were talking about it, his introduction to this world is basically, right in my wheelhouse. Devin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, thanks, Matt. I'm glad to be here.
Now, if you're tuning in for the first time, subscribe on youtube.com/MattBinder. You can also find the show at patreon.com/MattBinder, where you can support the show. If you're watching on the live stream on YouTube, you could also send the super chat during the show. If you want to send a super chat question for Devin, I will get that to him at the end of the free half of the show. It's also live on Facebook, Twitch, and on Twitter via Periscope. Devin, let's get right into it. Before we get into these two articles here, that these two new reports from your organization, I actually want to shout out one of the authors of one of those reports, who, well, why don't you explain it as his coworker?
Well, yeah, I want to give a shout out to Chuck Tanner, who is one of the best people doing work on covering the far right in the country. And it was unfortunate that he was hospitalized last week with what appears to be a pneumonia, which may be related to COVID-19. We're really fortunate that he's back home now and he's recuperating, but, it was touch and go there for a while. And, we just want to send out the best to him and his family.
Absolutely. And interesting that they, in terms of celebrities that get these coronavirus tests to confirm they are definitely positive, surprisingly, far-right researchers aren't up there with the NBA players and the Hollywood stars and the Billboard top 40 artists. Unfortunately, right? I mean,
yeah, not yet.
We'll get there. There'll be people will be clamoring for more Chuck and Devin and Matt Binder one day.
Yeah.
So, Devin, before we get into these two pieces, actually, I was basically making sure I introduced you right for the show and came across your bio. And there was something interesting for me, especially, as to how you got into basically tracking the far right. And it is via the punk rock scene, which, as anyone who listens to this show knows, that there are basically two things I try to tie everything I cover into, and one is pro wrestling, and the other is punk rock. No matter what it is, politics-wise, I'll always find a way to somehow make an analogy to punk rock or pro wrestling. But when we talk about white supremacy and neo-Nazis, the punk rock scene is actually not just analogous, it is very much part of that world. And I don't mean that there's a whole big, punk rock equals neo-Nazis, but the punk rock scene has been battling with neo-Nazis, at least the modern day neo-Nazi movement. More than anyone, and I stress modern day because obviously people fighting Hitler literally were a little bit more involved, but the modern day white supremacist movement the punk rock scene has been on the front lines.
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up in Spokane, Washington, which, for your listeners will know is pretty much a stone's throw away from the Aryan Nations compound at Hayden Lake, Idaho. So when I was coming up in the early 1980s, going to local punk shows, attending, house parties and all that kind of stuff, almost every weekend at different times, we would have white power skinheads come over from the Aryan Nations compound to either recruit or beat up my friends. So, I had a really visceral, firsthand experience with this stuff growing up. I think one of my first real big political actions was to take part in a small demonstration in downtown Spokane against Robert Matthews, who would later go on to form the Order, the violent white supremacist terrorist organization, which robbed an armored car for over $3 million, killed a Jewish talk show host and a Missouri state trooper. So, I was very much in tune to the kind of stuff going on around me. It was while I was still in high school that, a Catholic priest in Hayden Lake was bombed by an Aryan Nation splinter. There were assassination attempts. There were car bombings. There was all of this stuff going on around me, while at the same time I was becoming politicized by music and getting involved in the punk scene. So that really formed, kind of a core of my thinking about this stuff for a long time. And I stayed active on it and, really stayed engaged. As I went off to school, I was coming up at a time when there was kind of a decline in the big social movements, right? It was at the end of the Central American Solidarity and anti-apartheid stuff. I went through the anti-war movement, obviously with the first Gulf War. We were not successful at stopping it. I, for a while, tried looking at the environmental movement, but the idea of, basically at that time, helping protect the environment for wealthy white people to recreate wasn't really my thing. So, I was really looking for a place to plug in and do racial and social justice work when some folks with an organization based out of Portland called the Coalition for Human Dignity, a group which was formed in the wake of the Militias murder by a group of white power skinheads, came and gave a talk at my university. And from that moment on, I was hooked. I was like, how do I get involved? What do I do? So I started interning with that organization. They immediately started sending me to Klan rallies and militia meetings to gather up intelligence and figure out what's going on. And that's been over 25 years now. So I guess that's a long answer to your question.
No, that's really fascinating. And, we're from slightly different generations, but when I remember, when I turned 16 in the early 2000s, the first thing I did was I went to CBGB's, and I specifically remember my first show at CB's was Oxymoron, and I remember specifically at that show and specifically at a hardcore fest at CB's a few months after, really understanding from seeing some of the people there. Now remember, this is in New York City, so I mean, people like to think, oh, it's diverse. That's not happening there. But I specifically remember seeing, Nazis, neo-Nazis, and, skinhead neo-Nazis. And I remember thinking to myself, damn, like, this isn't like, people, I don't think people realize this is still a thing at this point. This is, during the Bush administration. This is before, white supremacists came back from underground, I guess you can say, and decided it was their moment in the sun once again. And, the punk rock scene has been talking about this forever. And I, as a teen, until I hit this moment, I remember thinking, like, why are all these punk bands still singing about this stuff? I don't see these Nazis around. But this is when I'm like, 11, 12, first getting into, skate punk and stuff. So, like, people who I think got involved in punk rock, regardless of what generation you were in, I mean, none of this we're seeing now is so surprising to us. Like, I think that's what a lot of people don't, like, obviously, we could have, maybe guessed if this would have ever happened in terms of their revival in the mainstream or whatever. But I mean, we always knew they were there. When I think a lot of people, 2016 hits and everyone's all of a sudden like, oh, I never even knew this was still a thing.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I know that, over the years, we've run into trouble helping people understand that not only is it there, but it's ever mutating. So more often than not, I think what we find for folks who aren't really paying close attention to this is they're fighting the last battles. They're looking for what white supremacy used to look like rather than what it looks like actually today. And that's one of the big reasons why I was really excited to be on your show is because, even when you were at MR, one of the things you were really good at was pointing to those new trends, right? In fact, even someone like myself who's been looking at this stuff for 25 years wasn't paying as close of attention to, the men's rights stuff and to the, some of the other extremely online activities. So, I got to give you a big shout out for doing some of that work.
Why, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no.
But, let's actually talk about that for a minute, because I think we will possibly see something like that happen again. And what I mean by that, I mean, there's a specific time period from about 2012 to early 2015 where there was this new white supremacist, neo-Nazi, and saying movement actually isn't correct, because these were multiple different scattered movements. I mean, you got men's rights, like you mentioned. On top of that, you have some people within the PUA world, and then even on top of that, you have men going their own way. And now, these things all overlap in a Venn diagram, but they're actually very distinct movements. And then aside from that, you then have what comes out in, 2014, Gamergate.
Absolutely.
And even the Gamergate movement came from different sub movements. You had 4chan, and then 8chan came out of that whole thing to begin with Gamergate. And you had these scattered different, basically what people online would just basically know is like, oh, these are, crappy, troll areas of the internet that we shouldn't pay attention to if you want to have a serious discussion, just for people messing around and being assholes and being generally shitty. But what we saw was, while there was that, there were certainly people who were just doing that and didn't have any political ideology. There was also a huge amount, a huge portion of those people who did have an ideology and was using that movement, those different sites to create this movement, I should say. And you're right when you say that, these all became the current, all moved up into the current white supremacist movement. And the interesting thing there is, when we talk about, coming up in the punk scene, those skinheads, they had, those racist skinheads, they had, Nazi swastika tattoos. They were, openly, basically putting out there traditional white supremacist, sort of, icons or signage. But these guys aren't doing that. They're sharing the ideology, they're spreading that, and of course there's the 4chan trolls using the swastika and being generally assholes, but the men's rights guys weren't throwing up the swastika or going Sig Heil or even necessarily being overt about their white supremacism anyway. They were generally able to move into and you don't even really hear about the men's rights guys as men's rights guys so much anymore, because the men's rights movement has basically become this far right movement we see now. That's basically a complete overlap in a Venn diagram with white supremacists.
Yeah, and I think what they did, and it's really an important point to stress, is what they did is they really helped supercharge misogyny inside of the white supremacist movement. Right beforehand, there were even attempts, to try to break the white supremacist glass ceiling for women in the movement. But with the rise of, the men's rights stuff and the go your own way stuff and now the black pill stuff and whatnot, it has created that kind of supercharging of anti-feminism, misogyny, and sexism inside that movement, which has helped to gain a lot of new hyper-alienated young white men into the movement and changed the dynamic once again.
Right. I think what you're going to see, actually, and it's already happening, but I think it's going to grow even more so now that basically overt white supremacism, once it got into the forefront here with with Trump ascending to the presidency, and then basically losing that sort of street cred, I guess, that comes with not having, not being in power. Once they get their guy in power and he's a big disappointment to them, which he actually is a big disappointment to a large portion of the white supremacists, which might surprise some people. They sort of, they sort of fall back a little bit. But what you will see, actually, is the ascension of more people who are, let's call it Tim Pool brain. People who are, just coming across as regular schlubs, just regular, I'm just a white guy who's got opinions. And what they're really doing is pushing this sort of anti-diversity message, really. When Tim Pool goes out there shitting on social justice warriors all the time, what he's really saying is he's basically putting out, far-right rhetoric.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there has been a space created for those folks to try and whitewash the kind of white nationalism that they're being promoted. That's what we see with, groups like the American Identity Movement and all the Groyper stuff. They're really at the forefront of trying to push hardcore white nationalist ideas into the mainstream by stripping off, the Klan robes or the swastika tattoos and trying to make it look respectable. It's a strategy that first kind of piloted by David Duke back in the 70s and 80s when he ran for the legislature, and won a seat in the Louisiana House of Representatives. And it is something now that is again returned to fashion as they see an opportunity, that they see a shot for themselves inside the mainstream to at least peel off new folks and to grow their ranks by looking more respectable and playing to the camera.
Right. They traded in the hood for a beanie.
Yeah.
So let's get into this. Now, obviously, the coronavirus is basically taking over, I would say, American life, but it's really taken over life worldwide. I mean, people are basically all around the world being affected by this. And
I have a friend in Paris who's currently in the hospital,
right,
suffering from. Yeah.
Right.
So,
and
it's.
Although I have seen that schools in South Korea are set to open up next week. I don't know if that's good. I mean, they really, South Korea and Hong Kong and Taiwan have done an incredible job with this. I mean, it's just, I guess the cultures are just different. They're much more, they care much more about the society as a whole there than, I guess, us Americans with our freedom and our individualism and our but that's...
you don't have Ammon Bundys running around over there telling them it's a government plot and that you should be out on the streets rather than social distancing and staying at home.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a big difference.
Right. So most of the world is dealing with this right now in a way that's keeping them at home, and if not at home, either on the front lines of a service job or on the front lines in the medical field. So I mean, or if you're lucky, maybe you're on a yacht like David Geffen, or you're in a nice jacuzzi like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who I still can't get over that. I don't know if you saw that video he put out. I still can't get over it.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Nothing will reach the youth of America to tell them to stay home in their studio apartments, if they even have that. Maybe a basement with parents, if they're even lucky enough to have a basement. Really stuck in small quarters, than a Hollywood celebrity in his jacuzzi smoking a cigar saying, "Look how easy staying at home is." Give me a break.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of tangents I'm going on here because of this coronavirus. You can tell I've been indoors for way too long.
Yeah, I hear you. Trust me.
But we're all dealing with this. And I think because everyone's been, everything I've seen is coronavirus, and rightfully so. But you put out, your organization put out 2 great reports that are basically looking at how A, militia groups, and B, white nationalists, which, again, want to bring up a Venn diagram, I would say it's almost completely overlapped. Maybe not quite. Let's give it to a few militia members who might not be fully on board with white supremacy yet, but it's close enough. these groups are leveraging the coronavirus to spread their ideology. And I think it would be dangerous to not take the time to cover this, which is why I'm having you on, because when the coronavirus is hopefully comes to an end, this pandemic comes to an end in the next few months, fingers crossed, even if it takes what experts are saying could be a year to a year and a half, but even if that's the case, these people and these groups will still be here, and who knows how many people they will have won over while basically people are sitting home with nothing to do and will possibly come across this stuff, this messaging, this material, this content, and maybe they'll get on board. I mean, I've been covering on this show so much how, the rise among young Generation Z and millennials in getting involved in white supremacy via YouTube, falling down the rabbit hole by, one day they're just falling on a Dennis PragerU video or a Ben Shapiro video, and the next thing they know, they're looking at whatever literally overt white supremacist channel that no longer is on YouTube because most of them seem to have been banned for the most part, the big ones have, it seems like. But, there's a whole generation of people who are now on board white supremacy because of that. And I fear that, you might have another boom in that world because of the coronavirus.
Well, just before we came on, I saw a new Pew study that showed that I think it was 22 or 23% of the American public thinks that the coronavirus is a government conspiracy. So, these ideas have already moved pretty rapidly from the margins to the mainstream, right? So they're already infecting the way people are thinking about the virus. And that has real implications for not only how we think about it, but also how we respond to it, and whether or not we're able to, think about this collectively with, mutual aid and other kinds of approaches to it, or we head down that rabbit hole where we become hyper individualists, where we start pulling out our guns and worried that everyone's coming to take our toilet paper.
It's interesting you bring up the guns because let's segue into the militia groups first. Cool. And the interesting thing about you bringing up the guns is I have seen I came across a chart with very interesting data. I wish I had it pulled up, but I wasn't planning on bringing it up, but you gave me a perfect opening for it. I saw a chart that basically said that Americans are now buying more guns because of the coronavirus than any other event that happened that spurred a boom in people buying firearms. And previously, the biggest boom for gun shops was right after Sandy Hook, when everyone thought that, wow, a bunch of basically kindergartners and first graders, I think it was, got murdered in this horrible school shooting. And if anything is going to cause this country to give a second look at how we treat guns in our society and in our laws, this has got to be the one. So, of course, we found out that was not the case. This country will take children being mowed down by firearms and just go and brush it off. Sadly.
Well, and before that, the last big increase was after President Obama got elected. Right? That was the last big spike in gun sales before then.
Right.
So it is, that kind of thing is very real. And listening to a podcast of far right activists from Eastern Washington, he started talking about how many gun dealers were worried about what they called the Trump slump, right? That gun sales had declined and that they weren't able to sell the same amount of guns that they did during the Obama era because nobody was worried about losing them. But that this has changed their fortunes quite significantly because everyone was running out to buy one because of the kind of fear and hysteria that some folks have been pushing out about coronavirus and our response to it.
Right. So, it's let's get into these militia groups, because I don't want to. We've been talking about it so much, and it's been great, but I definitely want to cover these reports because I feel like I want to know how these guys are leveraging the coronavirus. I mean, there's some interesting stuff in terms of the pivot, and I mean we've seen that even with the mainstream right wingers who went from this coronavirus is all a hoax to take down Trump to the coronavirus is a Chinese plot to get us, to some of them are now going out to hospitals to film a 45-second video clip showing no one driving into the hospital with coronavirus as proof that the media is making up that this is something dire at our hospitals, which is, I know if I had coronavirus, the first thing I would do is I would hop in my car and drive myself down to the local hospital, take the time to find some parking. I want to get a good spot now. And, I get that spot, and then I'd mosey on down to the front door, not the emergency room, not the emergency entrance, but you should know. Just get to that front door and go right in.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's ridiculous. So for the militias, their trajectory is pretty similar, right? They've essentially adopted one of three or all of three different approaches to looking at the coronavirus. The first is to argue that it's a hoax, right? To downplay the threats and to say that there's nothing to it. Those are the folks who are really who drunk the Trump Kool-Aid and are still diehard supporters. So if they're committed to protecting the current regime, they're more likely to try to downplay the coronavirus and say it's a hoax and spin out all kinds of nonsense about it. Just the most insane gibberish you can possibly imagine, but it gets recirculated over and over and over again, and people start believing it. The second thing that I think is the most common is the belief in conspiracy theories, right? And those take a couple different forms. The first of those forms is the idea that that somehow that this is a plot by the Democrats and or the deep state to destroy President Trump. Again, those are folks who are diehard Trump supporters, who are really into that. They've adopted the position that because one of the folks at the CDC had a connection to one of the folks who worked on the Mueller report, that therefore it was all tied together, and therefore it's all part of the entire deep state plot to overthrow Trump because they couldn't do it with impeachment. The other way that they approach the idea of it being a hoax is they argue, they start, using anecdotal evidence to say, I don't see anyone getting sick. Do you see anyone getting sick? I don't know anyone getting sick. Therefore, it can't be a problem, right? So they continue to downplay it, and they have for quite a while. There are still some folks doing that, but it's a little bit less. I mean, that's decreased quite a bit as the sheer overwhelming numbers have come in, and because President Trump has shifted directions as well. So the idea of downplaying it, I think, has decreased quite a bit. The second area where they're really big. Oh, go ahead.
No, please.
All right. That second area where they're really big is the idea of promoting conspiracy theory, right? And there are two main variants of that. The first is the idea that this is, it's an opportunity for them to push nativism and xenophobia, claiming that this was somehow a virus that was concocted in a lab in Wuhan, China, either as a biological weapon or as, that they either deliberately or unintentionally released into the wild. So they will use that and talk about, the Kung flu, or talk about, the various different ways in which they want to, go after, the Chinese for doing this. And of course, that kind of conspiracy rhetoric has real implications here in the U.S., as we've seen the number of hate crimes and assaults against Asian Americans spike dramatically. Once again, conspiracies are becoming action, and people are taking those words quite literally and lashing out at folks that they think are different because they think that this is somehow, a plot by the Chinese. Right? So that's the one thing. And then, the other conspiracy that has made the rounds quite a bit is the regurgitating of the old George Soros conspiracy, right? The idea that Soros, because he owns, part of some company that owns some patent linked to a coronavirus, not this one, but because he has those links, therefore he is doing this to deliberately sink the economy so he can therefore take over control and or, bring about his view of, a liberal state, and take down Trump because he said he wanted to take down Trump. So they think that somehow he was diabolical enough to come out with this kind of approach to get rid of the president rather than, supporting a presidential candidate to run against him or do anything else. He, somehow came up with this solution. And often embedded in that kind of stuff, obviously, is, as it has been from day one, either an implicit or an explicit anti-Semitism. It's a way to bring anti-Semitism back into the conversation. It happens a lot more with the white nationalist side, but it's certainly ever present even in the militia circle.
Right.
So, that's all there.
It's interesting that they go with the George Soros is involved with all this because in normie conspiracy theories, because they don't have the whole anti-Semitic bent to it, they attribute this all to Bill Gates. Have you noticed that?
Well, there is that. Yeah. There is that conspiracy as well, right? There is the, is the Bill Gates and Barack Obama conspiracy theory, which circulates as well, saying that because, Bill Gates and Barack Obama had something to do with a Netflix series called Pandemic, that somehow they knew it was coming and they were prepared for it. And, again, if you want to read the article and find out all the underlying assumptions based in these conspiracy theories, it's there, but, it's a bunch of garbage and it is, it is, go ahead.
I will say definitely a bunch of garbage, but when I saw that the Pandemic show come out on Netflix, I definitely was like, man, the timing on this, it's the producers of it must be, thinking, man, this went good for me. I mean,
oh, sure. Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the conspiracies, right? There's always that grain of truth, right? It's always,
right.
It's a fortunate incident of timing.
Right.
So, yeah.
I tried to, I actually put it on an episode of it, the first episode one night, and I ended up falling asleep. Not because I was just tired and I fell asleep. And I swear to God, with it playing in the background, I had the worst dreams, and I woke up, and I was just like, I just woke up feeling depressed, and I was like, it was still on TV, and I was like, I gotta shut this off, man. This is not good stuff to sleep to.
So that is definitely not stuff to watch right before bed.
Yeah, right. Tiger King, however, definitely what you should be watching right now, especially if you just need to just view the most insane stuff ever, yet still just get away from all the problems in the current world. It's just, have you watched?
Well, and there is a tie. Right? There is a tie, right? In that first episode of Tiger King, where the sheriff is talking about how he was worried about a little Waco, right? That there is that connection, right? Where these, the third area that militia groups are really intent on the Boogaloo.
Is Joe?
Right?
Do you have
do
you have any information on this? By the way, is Joe Exotic just a gun guy, or does he have any connection to militia groups? Do we?
He's just an Oklahoman.
Okay. Right, man. I think if you ask me, I don't know how much you've seen of it. Have you watched the whole thing or
just the first episode?
Just the first episode. Okay, I don't want to ruin it for you, but there's a whole subplot in there involving someone who is not Joe Exotic that definitely needs looking into, and it's incredible. That's just an aside there. I don't want to ruin it for anyone who hasn't. So, this is actually interesting, because would you say that, because I mentioned earlier how a lot of, the hardcore white nationalists have basically found Trump to be a disappointment. Whereas it seems like the militia groups, while there is that, that belief in the same sort of general ideology, it seems like a lot of them are much happier with Trump than, the guys going out there who's, militia groups, their number one thing is guns. The white supremacist ideology, for those who believe in it, is secondary. For the white supremacists, obviously, white supremacy is number one. It seems like the militia groups are generally happy with Trump when compared to the straight up number one priority white nationalist guys.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair to say. I think that they are.
Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
Don't just go back and want to make sure I didn't miss anything you said.
Oh, I think that's absolutely true. About what comes next. They're worried about what happens after Trump, but in general, they've been satisfied given his nativist agenda, given his pro-gun stance, given his evangelical community, which again there's a big overlap there, and overall, just looking at the kind of overall political agenda, they've been very happy. So it's been a challenge for them. Seeing some splits, right? There are some folks who are growing disenchanted.
Devin, I think our connection on Skype is going because your audio keeps breaking up. Let me call you right back just so we can get on a new connection, and that should fix it.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, folks, just give me 1 second. I'm just gonna call Devin right back, and that should solve the issue because otherwise I'm not getting any sort of quality. Hey, Devin, what's up? I don't hear you at all now. Well, that didn't help.
Hey, can you hear me now?
There we go. Yep.
Oh, good. Okay.
There we go. Okay.
Cool.
So, so you were saying how there's the evangelical overlap, and how they're very happy with Trump, and generally you believe that it seems like they sort of the gun guys aren't so worried about the future like white supremacists are when it comes to life after Trump.
Well, I think they are. I mean, I think that there's a real concern about life after Trump, right? There's already some dissatisfaction with Trump. Leaders like Ammon Bundy, one of the folks who led the standoff at the Malheur Refuge in Oregon a while back, who was involved in the armed standoff with law enforcement at their ranch in Nevada. He not only is disenchanted with President Trump, but he's also out there now talking about the coronavirus as being nothing to worry about, and we shouldn't let the government dictate what we're doing. So he's encouraging his members, to continue to violate the stay-at-home orders in the state of Idaho, and he's encouraging others, to stand up for liberty, as they like to refer to it, and go out and mingle with as many people as possible, I guess. So there is that strain within them. It's that kind of hyper individualistic, often considered a kind of a Western mentality, from folks out in the West, that is, again, supercharged by folks like Ammon Bundy and others who want to, promote this stuff for a political agenda, no matter who it hurts or how many people get injured by it. That's a pretty common theme for these folks. As early back as the early 1990s, I remember going to militia meetings. I was at one, I think, in 1994 in northern Idaho, where the militia of Montana was holding a gathering, and John Trockman, the kind of bushy, bearded leader of that organization, was up there flipping through all these slides on an overhead projector, talking about something called Project Jupiter 95, which was allegedly a plot by the Carter administration, of all things, to send a nuclear weapon to collide with the Levy-Shoemaker comet to send an electromagnetic pulse back to the United States to wipe out 2/3 of the world's population. It was at this point where he told the crowd that, they knew approximately when it was going to happen, but they didn't know which 2/3 of the Earth it was going to take out. So you were supposed to drive around in your truck for the next 7 days, tuned to a blank spot on the AM dial. And if you heard static, you had exactly 13 minutes to get to the easternmost corner of your basement and wait there until the militia told you it was safe to come out. I don't know how many people are still waiting down there.
Wow.
But, that's the kind of stuff that you'll hear, on the militia circuit. And, that's the kind of stuff that gets promoted in what I call the prepper industrial complex. All the folks running around, selling guns or selling, all kinds of home prepper type stuff to prepare folks for the upcoming apocalypse. They're really vulnerable to these kind of conspiracies. And if someone like an Ammon Bundy picks up steam, it could make it a lot harder for both first responders dealing with these kind of pandemics, as well as folks in law enforcement who might have to deal with them if they start gathering or doing things to try to circumvent the law.
I had not heard of that one. You think there's any similar sort of thing going on with coronavirus? You think there'll be some guy who comes out of his bunker in like 5 years to see if coronavirus has been, if they finally got that vaccine or something like that? I mean,
yeah, we can only hope. We can only hope that they stay down there for that long. It gives us an opportunity to try to rebuild once they're done doing their nonsense.
Now, have you seen any militia groups using this as an opportunity to grow their ranks in terms of specifically, promoting, their member, like trying to, build membership from this?
Yeah, we see a marked increase in the number of folks joining online militia groups, particularly on Facebook. Facebook has kind of become a haven for, militias, 3%ers, Oath Keepers, and other Minutemen and other so-called patriots.
Who are the big militia groups now? Because as someone who covers the far right, frankly, actually, the militia groups are not the area that is my specialty, pretty much. So, I know there's the big groups, the 3%ers, the Oath Keepers, the Minutemen, like you just mentioned. But are those still like the main ones, or is there up and coming militia groups that are, using this as to break out?
All of those, right? I mean, I think that there are lots of smaller, decentralized groups and networks, right? It's mostly run around a few kind of national chapters of groups like, 3% United Patriots, and other groups like that. But a lot of them are then broken down into state and then zones. They'll assign states different zones to kind of break down their membership. And I think at our last check, we found at least 800 or 900 different militia sphere groups on Facebook, attracting new members and bringing in tens of thousands of people into this stuff. And for some of them, they're actually out doing training and, live fire exercises. Others of them are just kind of, inundating themselves with the kind of conspiracies that we're talking about, right? So even if they're a kind of a keyboard commando, they're sitting there and they're just being fed this stuff over and over again in their feed. And it, I think, is having a real impact on both how they act, in the face of a pandemic, but also, what they're looking at politically. So, I think it has also moved to increase the fear level of folks, right? As we have moved into a phase where this stuff is, is getting real. People are starting to have to shelter in place and stay at home. That is ringing the alarm bells of martial law, and all of their conspiracy, spidey senses are going off. And so they are freaked out, right? So if you gaze into the feed of the militia sphere online, you will see video after video of troop transport trains moving by, and worries about weapons being deployed and the coming martial law, because they're worried that government is going to use this to come and take their guns. Right? It kind of builds on the kind of rhetoric that they had around the Virginia legislature's attempt to put some restrictions on assault weapons and the kind of rally that they had there. And they're using that to kind of move this stuff forward to a larger audience. And they're being successful, right? Because I think more people are freaked out. They want to have folks to turn to. In part because they have both the built-in conspiracy theory network, but also because they've spent so long kind of talking about self-sufficiency and, prepperism and preparing for the upcoming apocalypse. It's resonating with some folks, right? They're learning about this and they're hearing it and they're looking to get more involved and get more information because they're freaked out for their family. And those are the folks who are really worried about, the folks who, we often talk about this kind of stuff as a conveyor belt, right? Where there are many different spots along the way in which people can get on that conveyor belt, but then they're eventually drawn farther and farther and deeper into the kind of hardcore white nationalism that we're really concerned about, the kind of accelerationist neo-Nazi type stuff that we're seeing a flare up of now. But everyone gets on it in their own spot. And this is just one more spot along the conveyor belt that's drawing people in deeper and deeper.
Right, right. So let's move on now to let's ride that conveyor belt to the to the more overtly straight up white nationalists and how they are faring with the coronavirus. And let's start with this guy, because I saw he's mentioned in this great report you have out, but I had seen specific pieces just on this guy, and it's fascinating to me because I think this is a perfect example of how they're using the coronavirus to basically grow their own audiences. So there's this guy named Tom Kosinski, I believe that's how you say his last name. And
yeah, I think that's right.
Basically, he's a white nationalist who has developed a following for getting in early on the coronavirus podcast industry. He developed this coronavirus specific podcast called Coronavirus Central, and he basically has become a go-to coronavirus expert on iTunes, for podcasts. Like, people are listening to him for coronavirus information who have nothing in common with him ideology-wise.
Yeah, I mean, he was an out-and-out white nationalist who saw an opportunity, and, I'll give him credit for being entrepreneurial in that respect, but, he's using it to create a platform for himself and to try to mainstream himself, right? It's a pretty common tactic. You look for those moments of opportunity where you can move from the margins into the mainstream. They are, as a movement, becoming much more adept at that. And the kind of moves that they make are quicker and harder to follow. So this was one of those that thankfully didn't slip under the radar. Some other folks did some amazing reporting on initially finding that, and we did some follow-up on it to, get a better sense of who he was. But, that's the kind of stuff we're seeing a lot more of, right? That, there are those efforts to try to move into the mainstream, right? It is akin to, kind of what folks like Jordan Peterson and some of the IDW folks did in, taking the kind of self-help nonsense, making your bed and moving that to try to push a kind of a larger far-right agenda, right? It's just one more example, right? They learned from Peterson and those other folks that if you hop onto a trend and you feel a need, you can then use that space to push your ideas. And so I think that's what's going on a lot more here, is that he was the first to do it. I don't think he'll probably be the last as this stuff goes on.
So how else are white nationalists basically using this coronavirus? We talked about the militia groups. We talked about this one specific guy who had the foresight in getting in early in the coronavirus podcast industry. What are we seeing from, I don't know, like the big white nationalist websites? Like, how is I don't know, like Daily Storm or VDare covering this all?
Well, a lot of them are using it, like VDare is using it as a way to push nativism and xenophobia, right? The kind of idea that, I think it was Jared Taylor of American Renaissance who's talking about how xenophobia can save your life, right? At VDare, they're talking about how, it's entirely rational to be scared of Asian Americans now, right? That their bigotry is in fact justified by the current situation, right? They decided that this was the moment to have an opportunity to talk about, further advancing a kind of nativist, xenophobic agenda, rather than, spinning out anything new specifically. It was an opportunity to reinforce some of their ideas and try to make them more palatable to folks.
Right.
And that's certainly true for anti-Semitism as well. Folks like the American Identity Movement and some of the other more unabashed white nationalists who, have anti-Semitism at their core have used this to roll out some of the, the anti-Semitic stereotypes, like the memes about a Trojan horse being pushed up to the walls of the world and it being all to, that coronavirus is nothing more than a Trojan horse to promote Jewish domination, or that Jews were behind the coronavirus, or, a lot of those kind of different theories are being spread out there, and it's starting to have real world implications, We already saw in, last week, the incident in Missouri.
Right. I'm just going to bring that up perfectly. Let's talk about this guy.
You had the incident in Missouri where, a neo-Nazi accelerationist decided that as the stay-at-home orders were going into place in Missouri, that he couldn't wait any longer, so he decided that he was going to blow up a hospital that was housing coronavirus patients there in, a small town just south of Kansas City, in part to encourage panic and disorder and to help accelerate the coming collapse of the current order so that they could bring about, a race war and bring about, their kind of Nazi state that they envisioned. So that was the example of that. Just today, I saw another example, although it's not specifically white nationalist related, but in Los Angeles, someone who works in the military was arrested for driving his train at full speed off the tracks as a way to send a message that the coronavirus was a hoax. So, this stuff is, again, playing out in the real world. It's not just goofy, goofy ass conspiracy theories that are bouncing off on 4chan, but it's actually impacting folks in the real world.
Right. So with the guy in Missouri, it's interesting that he wanted to get ahead of the stay-at-home order, as if he was gonna follow that. Like I'm gonna commit this terrorist attack, but I gotta make sure I follow the governor's suggestion. So I gotta make sure. I don't. It's not even like they made a law. Like it's not in stay-at-home order. It's like a legal like it's just the governor's suggestion. My God.
Yeah, I think he was worried that what turned out to be the FBI agents he was buying the bomb parts from were actually going to stay at home and wouldn't have shown up to give him his bomb parts. So he was more worried about that than his own, enforcing, the stay-at-home order. But yes, I think there is some, absurdity to all of that. It is fortunate that he wasn't able to go through with this plot. I am worried that it won't be the last. We are headed into, we're now in the month of April. April 19th marks the 25th anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. So whether it being somebody, continuing to go down this accelerationist path, or somebody wanting to mark that terror attack and the murder of 168 innocent people in Oklahoma City with another dramatic incident is, certainly something we're paying pretty close attention to at the Institute. And I think a lot of other folks are too.
Right. So let's bring up, we had reached out to each other before the coronavirus pandemic hit, and you guys had a great report on Groypers. And I still want to have you on specifically to talk about them, so I don't want to use too much time to get into who they are, what they are, and everything in this episode.
Cool. Yeah.
But Michelle Malkin has become sort of a hero to them, and she's out there also sort of, I guess, regurgitating what Jared Taylor's position is, which is interesting, being that, Jared Taylor's a white guy and Michelle Malkin is not.
Well, Michelle Malkin is now taking to calling herself Mama Nazi, right? Because she's become the mother of the Groypers, as she likes to refer to herself. And she's done exactly that, right? She's regurgitated all the white nationalist lines about COVID-19 and used it as a way, to further her stature within the movement, right? Anything she can do to prove her bona fides to the folks is something that she's going to try to do now that she's gone all in on that side, right? I mean, granted, she doesn't need to do a whole lot, having written a book called In Defense of Internment.
Right.
But, she's still really trying to show that she can stay up to folks like Patrick Casey, who leads a group that used to be Identity Europa and, a hardcore anti-Semite and, white nationalists like Nick Fuentes. So, yeah.
But what I'm saying, I'm going somewhere here. So here we go. Okay. So Casey, Taylor, and Malkin all are using this to push this sort of anti-immigration agenda here. And I'm going to now jump into the mind of one of these guys, because I don't know if you've noticed, but a major thing in the white supremacist world is a lot of these guys are actually into Asian women because they feel like the cultures there fit with their whole idea of having the subservient wife, the trad wife, you know? Now,
Yeah.
what do they think about this immigration when, you know, there are guys who actually go to these places to basically find themselves some sort of young wife who has no choice but to basically marry one of these guys, and they get their subservient wife. Like, they really think that just, like, cutting off the Mexico border to Latinos is going to do something to this, but the white guys who come back from China, for example, they're okay, I'm sure, in their opinion, right? I mean, we're not. Are they?
Oh no, absolutely not, right? There is always a flexibility in their ideology that will allow them to carve out exceptions for their personal proclivities or for the proclivities of their friends, right? I mean, that has always been the case with white nationalism, right? It's an incomplete and ill-formed ideology. So there are always those exceptions they'll be willing to make to see the kind of larger, white ethno-state come about. Not all of them are for complete and utter genocide of all people of color. Some are for simply, relegating to people of color and Jews and others to second or third class citizenship status.
Right.
So there is some distinction and some debate within the movement confines about where that all fits. But yeah, it's always, kind of sketchy when they start doing that stuff. And it's, the kind of rhetoric that they use to talk about Asian women in particular, is both girded by their misogyny and, their racism and their white nationalism. It's still to further their kind of white nationalist goals and objectives.
Right. One of the funniest, I bring this up because one of the funniest moments, one of the moments on the show I'll never forget is in one of the earlier episodes when I was interviewing Caitlin Bennett, who is now known as the Kent State Gun Girl. And,
I remember this episode. It was hilarious.
And I was talking with her about her buddy. I forgot his name now, but he was the guy who was whacking everyone with a stick during the early 2017 protests, counter protests in what was it, Seattle, and then Berkeley.
Oh yeah, Kyle Chapman.
Thank you. Yes, Kyle Chapman. Yeah, and we were talking about it, and she goes, "He can't be a white supremacist. His wife is Asian." And it's one of the funniest things I remember because it's like, damn, you really haven't looked into what your buddies believe about their, they got a lot of racist thoughts about everyone, including what they think about Asian women. And that's what sort of actually attracts them to Asian women in a way, which is, a story, you'll probably do a whole episode on the weird mental problems with the people who believe that stuff. It's.
Oh yeah. I mean, if we wanted to go down the road sometime, we could talk about, Jean-Philippe Rushton, one of the leading figures of the eugenics movement of the last 30 years, right? His whole thing was he spent an entire academic career, to study that there was an alleged inverse relationship between penis size and IQ, right? And, yeah, I know. Yeah. He had a 35-year career doing that kind of stuff at a respectable Canadian institution, right? But also became, a justification for white nationalists to further the kind of eugenics agenda in the 21st century that, was, clearly drawn out of drawn back to, measuring skull sizes and phrenology and that kind of nonsense.
Just want to say I'm smart, but not too smart.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Fuentes. You brought him up, and I definitely want to get to him. We'll probably talk more about him way more in a. I'd love to have you back on in a couple of weeks to talk about the Groypers in detail because I think they really are worth their own episode. But let's talk about Fuentes. How's he handling all this?
Oh, he's done a couple of things. One is I think it's, he has gone down the rabbit hole of pushing all the kind of anti-Chinese conspiracy theories. But then he's also gone, on this whole kind of leaning towards third positionist Nazi position, talking about how, the coronavirus has exposed a tenuous and fragile order upon which our society rests. And he's talking about, how the domestic supply chains of food and water and things, are potentially going to run out. So, he's started to kind of move in that third positionist idea, to try to push more of the idea that we need a strong state to deliver those kind of goods, and that there are some problems with capitalism. Right. In essence, what he's doing is he's doing a more extreme version of the dance that Tucker Carlson is now doing, right? In terms of, at times talking about workers and, some of the issues around big companies like Amazon and things like that and monopoly power, as nods to, the kind of increasing role for the state that it can have in promoting a kind of a larger white nationalist agenda. He's just doing that, I think, in a much more conscious third position effort. In fact, he's on his show, he's talked about leaning towards a kind of third position view, which is a distinction from a lot of the rest of, his white nationalist cohorts. And it'll be interesting to see where he takes that, whether it's not just a fancy in this current era, or if it's something he's going to, kind of move to as he sees the market changing a little bit. So we don't exactly know where it's going to go, but it's something we're paying pretty close attention.
Let me bring up him now, because I was going to get to him next, but I think he belongs in this conversation because I've seen him sort of pushing the same rhetoric. Richard Spencer.
Yeah. I think Spencer has done a lot of the same, right? I think that they're now realizing that, okay, that this is the moment where you need a strong white state. The kind of libertarian ideals aren't going to work to bring about a white nationalist ethno-state, that you need that strong state to provide for, as they put it, the protection and security of the white race.
Right. The interesting thing is, during the coronavirus bailout discussion, when Congress was working on figuring out who was going to get all the money, was it going to be the corporations or the other corporations, and maybe we'll leave some leftovers for all of us. When that whole thing was going on, a couple of weeks ago, was it last week or the week before that? One of the
seems like an eternity ago.
Right. I don't even know what day it is anymore. It's April 1st, right? April Fool's Day. Happy April Fool's Day, everybody. Yeah. So one of the common conversations going on Twitter was that the Republicans, at least some Republicans, were out there floating bigger relief packages to ordinary workers. Like Mitt Romney wanted to give $2,000 to everyone. Some Republicans, I think, had suggested similar. And there was discussion on were Republicans trying to outflank Democrats. Now, I don't think that's the case, although maybe some of them did. Like, I think Mitt Romney was being truthful when he thought $2,000 for... we've seen this Mitt Romney as senator and how he is, and I don't think he's he's not a leftist. He's certainly a right-wing Republican, but he seemed like he would be someone who would float $2,000 for everyone. Obamacare is his baby after all.
Sure.
So, but other Republicans, I just think they were, we see what the package ended up being. It was not $2,000 or any sort of recurring monthly amount. It was Republicans fighting for the absolute minimum for a one-time for workers. But if we're going to talk about outflanking the left on this stuff, it seems like these guys, Spencer, and outflanking Democrats, I should say, Spencer, Fuentes, these guys seem like they are legit in what they're saying. And obviously they have their agenda they're pushing. They're not suddenly becoming leftists, and no one on the left should fall for their bullshit. But they know that this stuff plays. I think you're right. Which is why it's so frustrating when Democrats, when at least moderate Democrats, the mainstream Democrat, doesn't get this. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I have, there's many reasons, because I'm personally, find it interesting and am invested in it. But also, in terms of this show specifically, why I've been covering the primary so much. Because if you're going to defeat a Donald Trump, you have to get what's going on here on the far right. And Excuse me. And Trump, while he doesn't agree with this stuff, he also sees, and maybe he's not smart enough on his own to see it, but his advisors see it. You know, it wouldn't surprise me if Stephen Miller is telling him every day, you got to come off more and more populist, without a doubt. But they see how this plays. They know this helped Trump. And, you know, Bernie Sanders, in my view, that's why he is the person best, with the best ability to take on the whole, not just Trump, but the whole movement on the right. And, you know, that's sort of why I've been so intent on covering the primaries, because it really does fit into all this. I fear that someone like Biden, even if he beats Trump, you know, we're not going to see the destruction of the far right with a Biden administration. I'll tell you that much right now. If anything, you'll find a huge shot of adrenaline pumped into that whole movement. I'll tell you right now. I mean, the Bernie thing, they'd probably feed off him being Jewish, but when it comes to him trying to them trying to outflank the idea that he's a populist, there would be no success there, and that would harm their movement, I believe. I really do think that would be a huge hurt to that movement, because there are guys out there, there are people out there who are in that world because of the economic stuff. And you know what? If they got the economic stuff, maybe they wouldn't be so, you know, they probably would still be racist, but maybe they wouldn't mind it. You know, there's a subsection of that. And that is what I believe you find in those sort of people who are brainwashed by the YouTube stuff. You know, that whole new generation, they were looking for a scapegoat, and the far right gave it to them. But if they were taken out of that situation, they wouldn't need that scapegoat anymore. And I mean,
I think that's really important, right? That both you have the necessity of kind of universal programs to show that we're all in it together, and you, in essence, do two things. You remove the ability to be outflanked on your left by promoting ideas that are universal and helpful to everyone. And then you get to the situation where you are, in essence, putting a roadblock up to one of those entry points onto that conveyor belt, right? Some folks may find their way around it and find other ways to get onto that conveyor belt. But for a lot of folks, they're going to turn around and find, another way to get involved. You know, it's not, an economic or cultural issue specifically that is getting them on that conveyor belt, but it could just as easily take them down a road that leads them to, to something more progressive. I think that's a really important thing too, right?
Right. I mean,
so, part of what...
No, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was going to say, part of what we do at the Institute is our research is really designed to find those that are hotspots where that area, where people are being targeted for recruitment and, are being exposed to this idea, so that we can intervene in those areas and try to stop people from heading down those conveyor belts, right? It's really kind of important to, get ahead and start doing that in advance. So that's why we spend all our time doing all the research that we do. It's not, though we do find this stuff interesting and often pretty dang hilarious. It's also because we really want to get on the ground and figure out, how we get to this stuff first. And I think out of that, it can help teach us how, as those of us on the left can figure out messages that will reach those people before they head onto that conveyor belt, right? We both need to figure out the locations and will reach us before they, that rabbit hole.
Losing you on Skype again, but let's see. Just what was that last thing you just said? I want to make sure we get it.
Oh, I was saying it's really important, for those of us on the left, to look at those spaces where white nationalists and others are trying to find those new members, right? And it's important for us then to intervene with something that both speaks to those people with, a message that speaks to the issues that is really driving them towards that conveyor belt, but before they get there, and then speaks in a way that, that resonates with them, right? Because I think that, having done this work long enough, that I know that, I'm not the right messenger to talk to Zoomers, right?
Right.
And that's, you want to have folks have peer-based responses to organized bigotry at all times, right? You want to figure out, how you do those interventions in ways that are both meaningful and timely and, have a resonance with people. So, yeah.
I usually explain it like on this show. I usually mention I use the term true believers. Like I'm not saying, and I want to make this clear. I'm not saying that all of a sudden you got left wing policies and Richard Spencer is not racist anymore. Nick Fuentes is not racist anymore. No, those guys are the true believers. They're the ones who actually believe this stuff. Either it's not either, but it's a combination of both. They believe this stuff. And that's what their grift is. That's where they're making their money. They're not going to lose that.
Right.
So I'm not saying that, but they push this stuff because they know this is how you bring new people in. And if you want to understand this dynamic, don't listen to me saying it. Don't listen to Devin saying it. Listen to pretty much, and I feel confident saying this, every single person who's gone on the record to say, listen, I fell into that rabbit hole. I was a far-right winger. I was a white supremacist. I was a neo-Nazi. And then I came out of that. Let me share with you who I am now. They'll never say, now I'm an Obama-Biden Democrat. No. They always come out and say, listen, what pulled me out of this, what made me realize that we're all in this together and we're all human beings and it's us versus the people with the money and the power, and we need to all stand together, white, black, Latino, Native American, Asian, everybody. They say it's the left that did that for them. So I mean, that is the proof there. I mean, I've honestly never heard someone say, I was a neo-Nazi and now I'm a moderate Democrat. Never heard it in my life. Never in my life have I heard it. If you are one, please reach out to me. I want you on this show and I need an explanation.
Well, yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think there's also this other thing going on that, you really have to figure out, what's driving folks, right? That, at the Institute, we really wholeheartedly believe that movements matter. That's both why we track the movements on the right and also why we work to support and defend movements on the left, right? Because, there is an important sense of identity and belonging that comes with movement politics, right? And so we want to help more people find that sense of identity and belonging and ways to plug in and give their life meaning that is something more than, shuffling boxes at Amazon for 12 hours a day, right? That they have, agency in their life and they have the ability to do things that really matter to people. And so, I think that's another thing we've got to start thinking more about is that sense of identity and belonging and bringing more people in rather than, working to, more narrowly define ourselves as, on the left.
Right. So, Devin, is there anything from this report that I left out? I want to make sure I get this all. Is there any specific thing that we seem to have left out? Because there was one thing I was actually unfamiliar with until I read Zyklon 1488. I was unfamiliar with that. What is Gen Zyklon 1488?
It's a Telegram channel, designed to, it is the most awful group of memes, designed for, the Zoomers, right? But, the whole thing is a play on a lot of horrible neo-Nazi tropes, right? Zyklon being based on Zyklon B, the gas used in the gas chambers during the Holocaust, and 1488, of course, being the numbers, 14, which stands for the 14 words,
right?
Which, are the David Lane phrase about we must secure the existence of our,
right.
88 I'm sounding a little bit like Joe Biden there,
right?
It's really because I don't want to repeat it rather than I don't remember what what the preamble is.
Right. 88 is
and then
HH for, as we all know, Hulk Hogan.
Spoken like a real wrestling fan.
Yeah.
Well, the one in this report that got me that I actually had to look up was the use of 110. You know, the number 110. It's actually what it stands for is it's actually 109 or 110. 109 is supposedly the number of countries that have that have kicked Jews out, and 110 is the hope that the United States will do that.
Right.
So, you know, the expulsion of Jews is something that, of course, in white nationalist circles, they're really excited about and hoping that the conspiracy theories they promote around coronavirus being a Jewish plot is something that they can get on board with and help move that along on the overall political agenda.
I need to jump on Telegram because I've noticed that Telegram is becoming a place where all these guys seem to have found as their final refuge. I mean, I guess it's sort of good that they're there in terms of it's easy to follow, yet most people are not going to go out of their way to do that. Like, it's not like they're in a private channel that we can't get into. But it's also, there is an extra step to Telegram that would mean most normies who would usually come across this on YouTube or even just going to 4chan or 8chan, it's just that an extra step that some of them just wouldn't do. So I guess Telegram, if they were going to go somewhere, Telegram's the best place. It's not private, but it's not easily accessible enough.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Devin, you got to come back on this show because we got to talk about a lot more, especially that report on the Groypers, because I really want to do
anytime.
A complete episode on them because,
cool.
I mean, that is an interesting movement. If you were to tell me that the alt-right was going to basically, the most analogous thing to the alt-right in 2019, 2020 would be something called the Groypers and explain them to me, I would be like, man, interesting, but also, how far they have fallen.
Yeah, you and me both. I had the same opinion when I started reading that stuff. Yeah,
right. But it is interesting to see who is in that now because, I mean, Michelle Malkin was a completely palpable to the right. You know, she wasn't. You know, she was a right winger. She was extreme right winger, but she was accepted by mainstream Republicans. And now that's completely, she's just, I mean, even they see that she's gone off the rails, which is, I'm not giving them credit. I'm just saying how far she's gone.
Oh, yeah. No. I mean,
because they built that. I want to just add, they built that before you get, they built that.
That is absolutely true. They are responsible for all this nonsense. You know, during the Tea Party era, you know, we spent so much time trying to convince people that you got to pay attention to this stuff. It's going to come back to bite us. You know, and we were often met with, deaf ears, but it is certainly coming back full force. And now to see a Republican group, working to try to get Michelle Malkin kicked out of the 200 or so papers she's currently syndicated in is, an interesting dynamic. Little too little too late, but, things have certainly changed in the past couple of years.
Right. Devin Burghart, president of the Institute for Research and Education on Human Rights. Tell everybody where they can find you and your organization.
You can find me, you can find all of our institute's work at IREHR.org. You can find me on Twitter at dburghart, that's DBURGHART. And you can find us, you can now download our new smartphone app called Trepper, the anti-bigotry app, available for both iPhone and Android on the Google Play Store and iTunes.
Devin, thanks for coming on. If you'd definitely like to have you on soon again. And my best wishes to your coworker Chuck, and maybe next time he could even jump on and we'll all discuss this too. That would be a perfect scenario to show that he's defeated this.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, anytime, Matt. I really enjoyed it.
All right, take care. Have a good night.
Too. Yeah, you too.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to jump to the second half of the show. I'll take some comments. And let's do that. But first off, patreon.com/MattBinder. If you can afford to become a patron, please do so. If you cannot, especially during these times, I completely get it. And do not become a patron. That's patreon.com/ Matt Binder if you can. We have lost a few patrons. It's okay, obviously, because I want everyone to take care of themselves. But the people who have stuck by me, I want to give them that shout out because can't do it without you. And those people are Abigail T, Adam Q, Alan B, Amanda H, Andrew C, Andrew H, Angela, IREHR, Baka, Ben, Benji, Bobby M, Brosnan, Champagne Kami, Chris, Christine H, Colin R, Connor R, Cracker Barrel, CT, Cynthia J, Dan K, Dank Uger, Dave K, Dave Z, David Z, I should say, Daya, Doug H, Dragon Slayer, Eugene B, Froz K, FTW All Day, Greywind, Greg D, Grim, Hitesh, Igor D, Jack D, Jameson Test, Janelle A, Jasmine H, Jeremy M, John B, John S, Jonathan B, Jonathan L, Joseph H, Joseph R, Joyce M, Justin S, Katie S. Going to the next page here. That's right, 2 pages. Look at that. Where did it go? Where did the next page button go? I'm blind. There we go. Kaushal, Lance R, Lisa D, M. Carol, Mariah, Mark S, Matt Z, Max W, me, Melissa M, Mitch V, Michael B, Michael J, Michael M, Mr. Danks, Nicole A, Namdenet, Null Style, Odeth, Paul M, Penelope D, Qster, Rad Dad, Remy, Ryan, Scott R, Seth K, Sean H, Snazzles, Stephen R, Stephen S, Steve A, TM, Tammy G, Terrence R, Hypervisor, This Is Not Pizza, Tina M, Todd K, Tom M, Vance S, Why That Tie Guy, Utopian, and of course, last but not least, Zoe. Folks, youtube.com/Matt Binder. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Doomedpod.com for the podcast. Also subscribe at iTunes and Google Play, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Leave a review on iTunes. A written review is extra helpful, not just a star review, but I'll take a star review too. What else? Tell your friends about the show. Tell your family about the show. Spread the word about the show. Share the show. Tell me who you want to see on the show. Tell who else you listen to that you want to see me on their show. What else? I said the last episode I want to do more episodes while we're all home during this pandemic. I still want to do more episodes. Things are just kind of hectic with the kids during the day and also working from home during the day. I'm very lucky to still have my job as a reporter for Mashable. And I'm not complaining about that, but being home and doing all this definitely makes it a little bit harder. You have no idea how much work I do for Doomed on my commute. I'm not commuting anymore. So what I'd like to do actually is I'd like to just talk to people about how everyone's holding up during this. Just shooting the shit and discussing life during a pandemic. This is uncharted territory for many generations. I think the last time there was a pandemic, I think my grandma, who was 96 when she passed away in 2012, that's when she was like 1 or 2 maybe. I mean, we're in crazy territory here. So it would be cool to just talk with people, whether it be my listeners or just, we could do a conversation on Skype, stream it on all these channels. Just doesn't have to be the usual sort of Doom podcast episode. It could just be us talking about whatever is going on, because that's interesting enough during all this. We're living history, man. So yeah, if you'd like to come on the show during one of those episodes, hit me up on Twitter at Matt Binder or email me. My email's there too. Let's do some more streaming. And I'll still do the regular interview episodes like this with experts and reporters and writers and other leftist streamers, and we'll have a good time still, all around. Yeah, all that said, see you guys. We're gonna do a member show. We went really over with the first half. We'll still do a a fun second half of the show for patrons. We'll do that right now, but for everybody else who's not watching the live stream or is not a patron, we'll see you all next time on Doom. I think I muted it too fast. Let me try that again. See you all next time on Doomed. All right, patrons, what's up? We are back on the show. Let's do this. Let me first get to the super chat. Oh, we got one from Renee. Thanks, Renee. The video with Arnold and his donkeys was cute. Okay, I'll give you that. The one with Arnold and his donkeys was cute because that's just, I mean, I guess living where he lives, I guess you need some sort of money to have donkeys just hanging out in your house. Your house got to be big enough. But just the act of owning donkeys is not in and of itself some sort of rich bourgeoisie thing, like sitting in your jacuzzi smoking a cigar is. So I'll hand it to you there. Okay. The video with Arnold and his donkeys was fairly cute. Oh, right. Just let me bring this up. One of my favorite movies is That Thing You Do if you've never seen it. And Adam Schlesinger, who co-founded the band Fountains of Wayne and wrote the title song from that movie, That Thing You Do. And if you've seen the movie, you understand how important that song is to that movie. It's not just a song on a soundtrack. It's literally an integral part of that movie. It's played many times during the movie. It's part of the storyline of the movie. He passed away today from coronavirus. So, R.I.P. to him. It's very sad. He was only in his 50s. Early 50s, too. I think he's 52. I mean, this is serious stuff where we're hitting here. We got thousands of deaths in this country. It just came to my attention today that New York City just released the details on how this is broken down by zip code. And the zip code with the most positive cases of coronavirus, nearly 1,000 as of today, is 11368, which and the neighborhoods in that zip code are Corona, interestingly enough, Jackson Heights, Flushing, which you guys know is where I live, and Elmhurst. And these are extremely diverse neighborhoods. There are majority in the specific neighborhood. In Flushing, it's majority Asian American. But in those other neighborhoods, Asian, I should say, obviously Asian American too, but Asian immigrants as well. But in the other three neighborhoods I mentioned, it's majority Latino and Hispanic. So, I mean, you're seeing how this coronavirus is affecting people. You'll hear well-off people. You'll hear celebrities. You'll hear politicians. You'll hear them say how we're all in this together. But the truth is we're not. We're really not. I mean, in terms of the coronavirus itself, it doesn't see race. It'll affect anyone. It doesn't see your net worth or your income level. It'll affect you too. But how we, human beings, have structured society, we have given this coronavirus a vision of race and class. Because the way we've structured society makes our Latino and Asian and black members of society more vulnerable. And they live in those zip codes. And if you look at this, majority of those races live in those neighborhoods. The majority races are those minority groups. And if you look at the income levels in those neighborhoods, the outer boroughs of New York City, you'll find this is where the service jobs are. This is where the labor jobs are, the blue-collar jobs. The people who take those jobs, they live in these zip codes. They live in those neighborhoods. And they are the ones who are traveling by public transportation. I mean, they are the ones who are doing jobs that make them more susceptible to catching this thing. And it's just stunning when you hear people talk about how we're all in this together to me. Because we're really not. You can tell by who's getting tested. You can tell by who is fighting this and winning and recuperating. I mean, and even on a lesser scale of the people who are dying, we're not all in this together because not everyone is worried about making rent today on April 1st. Celebrities are not worried. Arnold Schwarzenegger sitting in his jacuzzi is not worried about that. They're also not worried. Excuse me. I have allergies hitting me, and I ran out of my drink that's helping with them. They're not worried about how they're dealing with everyday life, where they're sequestered inside a small space with multiple family members. I mean, they don't have small children who can't go upstairs and downstairs and run around and have the space of a backyard. I mean, I'm dealing with, and again, I'm very lucky. I got a job that's still paying me. Everyone I know, in terms of my immediate family and everyone seems to be safe and healthy so far. But you know, it's a struggle to do this. You know, my kid's not in school. He's not getting the activity time he needs. He's not socializing. We got a 10-month-old who's also was able to go outside, and you know, it's difficult. And these guys don't have to deal with that. Because even if they got small kids, they got the space where these kids could run around and play and be loud and do the things they would do outside, but indoors. Our kids, and when I say our kids, I mean people who are in my situation, which is us, regular people, everyday common folk. We don't have that. We just don't. And I mean, that, like I said, that's on the lesser side of things. That's all things considered. But you know, it's just we're really not all in this together. We're really not. It's not something that we're all... I mean, like I mentioned in the first half of the show, David Geffen, the music mogul who's a billionaire, was Instagramming photos of him on his yacht, saying, you know, waiting this out on my yacht, showing his the beautiful sunrise. And he goes, hope everyone's safe and healthy. Fuck you. Fuck you. Same for Arnold Schwarzenegger in his jacuzzi telling people to stay home. Screw you, man. You don't get it. All these celebrities telling people to stay home. You don't get it. I mean, I can't... Listen. Young people... Anyone. The whole idea of just attacking young people, too, for going out. Listen, are there some stupid young people who are out partying during spring break? Of course. But it's not just young people. You're seeing people of all ages dismiss this thing and go out. I mean, listen. People have to go out. I mean, I go outside. I don't hang out. I go outside. I get some fresh air. I mean, I'm still ordering takeout and doing that because it's hard with the grocery stores. It's either everything's sold out, either the grocery store's closed, either there's an hours long line on the grocery store just to go in and find out what you need is out of stock. Just the ability to be able to buy lots of things at once means that you have income that enables you to not live paycheck by paycheck. I mean, it's honestly, it's a little bit more expensive, obviously, but it's honestly a lot easier to just find a place that's still open and order that $15 large pizza pie. Honestly. You know you're set. And with the kids, if you have kids, or just, you don't have to worry about finding the time to cook. I mean, I'm not going out and socializing and hanging out. My trips are all with a goal and a purpose for an essential item like food or just today we got paper towels and toilet paper. I mean, but still, if I didn't have those short walks and trips, I'd be going insane, to be quite honest. I mean, I already feel myself being less healthy. I mean, I'm someone who walks a lot. I walk everywhere I can. Living in New York, it's one of the good things about the city is that everything's walking distance, and even the things that are not walking distance in any other city are walking distance here, because everything's everything's the city. So it's not like you're walking these big, rural, open fields that everything just blends in and you feel like you're walking forever. You can walk for miles and be, just watching everything while you're walking. It's like nothing, but you're getting the exercise of walking those miles. I mean, I'm not going out doing those walks anymore. I mean, yeah, Zoe's bringing up, what about Ellen bored on her couch? Listen, man, celebrities, I'm sorry you're bored on your nice couch. Even young people who are home, man. Even young people who are home. But where do you think they're going? A lot of them have roommates, so they're secluded to their bedroom, which also means that their health lies within the hands of their roommates, who their roommates aren't their family, so it's not like there's some sort of that mutual understanding there, or so those roommates might go out and be irresponsible, or those roommates might have jobs they can't leave and they have to go out. So there's really no safe self-quarantining. I mean, it's just they don't get it. They don't understand how people are living. I mean, you're a young person, you got roommates, so there's one thing. You can't even safely self-quarantine if your roommates, who you have no authority over, are working these jobs or going out or doing whatever. And then you have people with kids, parents with kids. They need to take care of their kids, or they're working a job. They need to take their kids to someone to stay, a family member to stay with if they have to, they're working a job they need to go to. In the chat, they're talking about the homeless population. Exactly. Homeless people. I was reading a story the other day about a homeless guy in the city, in New York City, who was feeling the effects of coronavirus. He was sick with it. And he tested positive. And they told him to go home. And he was like, I don't have a home. And they were like, he was like, I live in a shelter and I don't want to get people there sick. So he slept in a park. And they didn't offer him anything either. They didn't offer him any sort of out, any advice. They basically said, well, you got to go back to the shelter. I'm sorry, man. If you're living in any way where it's comfortable for you to be home, and the only thing you have to worry about is being, I wish I was bored. I've never been less bored in my life. I'll tell you that. It would be it's a privilege to be bored right now. A privilege. Boredom is boredom is looking really good right now. I'll tell you that. Let's go to more comments here. Zoe, love and recovery to Chuck. Absolutely. Zoe also says Nazi punks fuck off, right? Oh yeah, they're talking some Twitch talk in the comments. I was invited to be a Twitch affiliate. I need to get on top of that. I need to see what's I'm it's like one of the areas where I feel like an old man. I'm not much of a Twitch person, but I need to be. Never really got into the whole watching other people play video games, so that's part of it. So, what you gonna do? So he says Tim Pool Brain. Is that a beanie? Isn't that a beanie? Right. So he also says, Matt, please have a debate with Tim Pool like Sam Cedar did. I want him to compare you to Darth Vader or something. I should reach out to Grim says Andy No plus times Stone. Oh right, Andy No is using a comic as his header from Stone Toss, which is like he's like a Holocaust denying comic book art web comic guy. I need to do an episode on him too. It's a great idea. Silicone Baby says the best way to prove you're totally not a Nazi is to have Stone Toss make artwork for you. Right. Champagne Kami says glad to see Matt is doing well. My dad says today's Majority Report was the KK and K show, the Ken and Ken show. Yes, I saw a little bit of it. That was I miss doing that show. I miss doing Majority Report, and I miss doing the Ken and Ken show. I used to be the one to facilitate that, where I would spill my energy drink onto the Majority Report soundboard, which would somehow get the connections crossed, and it would air the Ken and Ken show on the Majority Report feed. Zoe, I laughed so fucking much at the K and K show. Mariah says, I missed Matt. It's been forever. I've always been here. You new to the show, Mariah? Well, welcome, first of all. That's the most important thing. Zoe pointing out when I was talking about YouTubers who are banned, white supremacist YouTubers who are banned, points out Stefan Molyneux hasn't been banned, right? My dad says that his son, Matt, was the original dork. That's true. I was the original dork on the KK and K show. Oh, Renee, whatever happened to it's probably a little bit less now, but we should go back to doing that show on what's going on with Bolivia that we were talking about with Montserrat. Rad Dad does essential work. What do you do, Rad Dad? My dad said, "What's your essential work, Rad Dad?" Let me see what. Oh, Rad Dad said, "I wish my work would get shut down." Oh, yeah, auto repair. Ah, interesting. I mean, I get why that's essential, obviously, but interesting. Less people are driving, but obviously the people who are, it's important if something happens, they have someone to fix their car. Um, Pernician. When I do go out, it feels really weird. Grocery shopping feels like we're in a zombie apocalypse, but everyone is still polite to one another, because no one is really sure who the zombies are. Right? It is interesting because it's like it feels like some weird in between. Like it's not quite apocalypse, but it's pretty close. Like I almost, you know, it almost feels like you're in a zombie movie, right? I mean, I was out the other day at Rite Aid, and as I was walking back, I heard so many emergency sirens, and then a helicopter flies overhead, and there's so few people on the streets, and the people who are there are like hustling with like their supplies and their bags of groceries and their paper towels. That it really does feel like you're just in a movie, like a zombie apocalypse movie. At least the zombie apocalypse, things aren't going back to normal afterwards, and that society's going to change, and everyone better get used to it, and that the people who are in power may not be those in power anymore. The depressing part about that, that's me finding the best case out of total apocalypse. Funny enough, to me, the saddest thing about this is it's going to happen. Hundreds of thousands of people are probably going to lose their lives, and that's the best case scenario. And there's going to be so many people trying to just get back to business as usual. That to me is the saddest thing. If we're looking to what's happening after, what could happen afterwards. And I'm sorry, I feel not to be all doom and gloom on this show called Doomed, but I really fear that's going to be the case. Right, that says a lot of people in New York aren't following the guidelines. It's really hard in New York, man. I don't think people really get it. I mean, obviously there are people being irresponsible. I mean, those pictures of people all congregating together to take photos and video of the military hospital ship coming in. Those are fucking idiots. Absolutely, you're right. But it's really hard in New York, man. Listen, there's people who live in apartments that don't even have kitchens. I mean, people have to go out in this city. I mean, in China, what they did is the military dropped off groceries to everyone. Made sure everyone got groceries. Everyone got food supply. The government did something like that. It would be a lot easier for people in New York. I mean, obviously, we'd still have the issue of people who didn't have the means to cook in New York. But, I mean, perhaps they could give out pre-prepared meals. Papa Bear Alaska says, blessings from Alaska. I hope you're doing well and staying safe. Alaska seems like it'd be a nice place to be right now, doesn't it? It would be nice to be anywhere that's getting back to normal. Or never had it hit hard enough. Where there was no more normal. In terms of everyday life. Obviously, in being able to go to your favorite restaurant or seeing a movie or hanging out with friends, that stuff. Obviously, I don't want to go back to everyday life in terms of the shitty reality of the shitty situations we're in. Goro on Twitch says, "Are you implying the Republicans made the virus?" Who's saying that? I don't think anyone on this show implied that whatsoever. Yeah, we got a few crazy right wingers in this in the Periscope and Twitch chats today, but it's all right. Pernician says, if they can keep the power on, the internet up, and food on the grocery shelves, people will not riot. The moment those things start going away, big trouble. Right, electricity is going to be a big thing. As long as that our power is still up and running, I think people will generally feel like they're fine. The grocery stores obviously will cause a problem as well, but I think the electricity is the biggest issue. And as long as the power is up, I think people will generally be fine. In terms of living under the pandemic. Philadelphia fan says gun freaks in Washington are ready to riot over gun store closures. Renee says, can I call in, Matt? I promise not to be random. Renee, let's do an episode. You'll be one of the people who call in. We'll do an episode. Like I mentioned, I want to do episodes with just, I want to do more live streams. I can't get guests on everyone if I want to do more live streams. Because it would be difficult to, Majority Report is Sam's full-time thing. That's how he's able to line up daily guests Monday through Friday. Booking guests is hard. I can tell you that from doing it for the past, 10 years now? It's hard. Not only do you have to find good guests, once you find them, you have to get them to come on the show. And there's a lot of people who would like to come on the show but can't due to various other reasons. Some of them don't have the equipment necessary. Some of them are not where they usually be, where they have the equipment necessary. Some of them don't have the ability via time or family living situation. Booking guests is hard. And I'm still amazed sometimes that I'm lucky enough to be in a position where people want to come on this show and able to find at least one guest a week. But I think I'd have trouble if I tried to do a lot more shows with a lot more guests. But to do live streams with just everybody, just listeners and people who follow me on social media and acquaintances and stuff like that, I'd love to do that. That we could do every day because there's a never-ending supply of that, right? Let's do it. Grim says, Groypers are a big part of the TrueAnon and Cumtown audience, even more so What's Left and Red Scare. I have to look more into that. Grim is always on top of who on the left has some unsavory ties. I don't know about TrueAnon. I don't know about them. Cumtown wouldn't surprise me. Even though those guys are not Groypers, the actual guys on the show, obviously. But I see the why some Groypers would like that show. Grim, we should do a show on that. Fred says on Periscope, 200,000 people will die of coronavirus because clown in power ignored the early warnings. Oh, Trump definitely has blood on his hands, no doubt about it. Pernician says, does Binder have the COVID? No, I've had this cough for months. It's allergies. It's from having nasal drip and not being able to get rid of these allergies. Maybe I do have coronavirus. Who knows? No, I've not. I mean, at least I didn't have it. Who knows if I've gotten it? That's. Grim says way more than 200,000 will die. Philadelphia fan says 200,000 is the low end. It'll be more like 1.2 million. It's. Yeah. It's not looking good. It's very, very distressing to see, to say the least. I mean, it still would have been here. The government, Trump fucked up, no doubt about it, but it still would have been here. The question is, how long would we have to have self-quarantined? How many people would have died? I mean, there would have been loss of life for sure, but how many more are dying because of this? Would we have been able to get back to our school and workplace and places and revenue streams quicker, like we're seeing South Korea? Grim says, y'all thinking the general election won't be indefinitely postponed? Well, a lot of people think this, but listen, Inauguration Day 2021, if there's not an election before then, Trump and Pence are no longer the president and vice president. I mean, this is how it works. It's the established law. So they could postpone it to December if they'd like, early January maybe. But if there's not an election held before Inauguration Day, then we don't have a president. That's how it works. Personally, I think Trump would like an election to happen because he likes to win. And he wants to come across as strong. That's his worry. So I'm actually not worried about that, truthfully. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not going to be wrong, but that's my personal outlook. Where's the comments here? Parnassian says Binder definitely has the COVID. I'm good. I mean, maybe I'm asymptomatic and I do have it. Who knows? Listen, Andrew Cuomo's little bro, Chris Cuomo, could do the show. So maybe I got it and I'm doing the show. Who knows? Screw Andrew Cuomo, though. Man, fuck that guy. Everyone thinks he's so strong. Because, yeah, he's doing a good job sounding good in his television press conferences. But then today, just now, we got lawmakers in New York reaching a budget agreement. Spending will be reduced. No tax hike period. School aid is held flat. There's billions in Medicaid reductions during a pandemic. Cuomo will have the power to do mid-year cuts. He's pulling back on the new bail law, and pot will not be legalized. This is the tentative budget agreement, and this is what Cuomo wants. But everyone last week and this week are all, oh, Andrew Cuomo's so dreamy because he sounds so strong on TV. Hubba hubba, what a hunk of a man. Ooh, that Andrew Cuomo. Fucking idiots. Idiots. No care about policy whatsoever. Go do entertainment news. Don't write about politics. Fucking idiots. Literally. There were articles about how handsome and dreamy Andrew Cuomo is. Oh, Andrew Cuomo should take over for Biden, become the nominee. Oh, I love Andrew Cuomo now. Gross. You just say you've never paid attention to New York politics in your life. Fuck you, seriously. Anyone who said anything like that, screw you. No care about actual people and the policies that Andrew Cuomo has pushed on this city. Democrats have all branches of government in this state. Yet our governor, a supposed Democrat, forces Republican policy on what should be the most progressive state in the nation. Enraging. And even on the coronavirus, this guy refusing the stay-at-home order that de Blasio... And listen, de Blasio's got blamed too. De Blasio ain't perfect. De Blasio sucks in many ways too. He's screwed up in many ways, no doubt about it. But de Blasio was right about that there should have been a stay-at-home order in New York City. New Yorkers shouldn't have been leaving the city. Cuomo didn't want to do that. Cuomo did not want to do that. And you know why he didn't want to do that? He'll say whatever reasoning he wanted, but when it comes down to it, because it was de Blasio's idea, and he's got this petty feud with de Blasio. The both of them have a feud going on. The governor of New York hates the mayor of New York City. And it has wreaked havoc on this city in so many ways, from public transportation beyond. Petty feud the governor is perpetuating during a pandemic. Oh, Andrew Cuomo's so dreamy. Oh, that hunk of man. Idiots. Don't know a thing about politics, yet you have a job making who knows how much, writing pieces on Andrew Cuomo being a heartthrob. Gross. Yet smart people who write about politics forced to work freelance because they don't toe the bullshit that you write, are out there without their freelance work, no jobs, no health care right now. Disgusting. I'm so, every day I become more just disgusted by the media industry, the mainstream media industry, the fucking Democratic establishment. Just honestly, it's getting to a point. Listen, I cover the far right. I fucking know how gross Republicans are. I know how gross the right is. It's not news to me. But I'm quite honestly more disgusted by the mainstream media's failures to accurately cover this shit and the Democratic establishment's inability to rise to the occasion. Honestly, you're more disappointed by those you expect better from. So that's why I am more disgusted by those groups. We got some more super chats here. Oh, Renee is single-handedly funding this show via super chats. Renee says, now Adriana is getting involved with staying in, and of course, Janine and her evangelicals are getting poor people killed this time indirectly. Normal wasn't any better either, right? Zoe, oh wait, I'm sorry. Who is this? Renee with another super chat. Renee. Capitalism is killing people. Trump is just herpes. Well, thank you, Renee. Philadelphia fan says near attendant equals enemy of the people. All right. Rad Dad says, I understand that people are stupid and are continually violating both quarantine and social distancing policies in public every day. I mean, there are stupid people, but there's also people who have no choice. Rad Dad says, I didn't have to work. If I didn't have to work, I wouldn't leave my house but like once a week to get food. The parks were packed last weekend all over the country. Yeah, people going to the parks are not, that's not good. So those people are not smart. I mean, you could get your exercise in more secluded areas, for sure. There's no need to go to the park and congregate there. I think in New York City, they just officially shut down the parks because of this. Wesley says, Meghan McCain is a far right-winger becoming a centrist lib. She's still in transition. Nah, don't be fooled by people like Meghan McCain. What they're doing is they're temporarily trying to sound this way. Because they think they're going to get their slightly less racist version of the Republican Party back. That's all they want. They're using a Biden. They're just simply using a Biden to facilitate a transfer that they think is going to happen, but is not going to happen, from a Trump Republican Party to the party of just slightly less racism than the Trump Republican Party. Slightly less overt racism, I should say. The racism remains the same. The tone and the dog whistle, that's what changes. Silicon Baby. Oh, the View thing with Bernie today, right? That was horrible. Oh man, let's save that for the next show. That deserves its own discussion. But members, patrons, if you haven't seen it, my God, look up the intro to Bernie's segment on The View today and Whoopi Goldberg's interviewing Bernie. It is, my God. Here, this comment will give you an example of it. Silicon Baby says, give it a couple of weeks and Whoopi will be telling us what Biden did wasn't rape. That's another discussion, too, about the Biden rape allegations. Lord Arion says, Whoopi still defends Roman Polanski and Woody Allen, if I recall. All right. Michael on Twitch, Horseshoe Theory confirmed Alyssa Milano shares right-wing propaganda from the Daily Wire to own the left. What? I think I did see this right when I was going live, but I didn't get to... Milano Twitter. Whoa. This isn't just sharing right-wing propaganda from the Daily Wire. What she's essentially doing is agreeing with the take, which is Bernie Sanders suggests he would not have shut down travel to U.S. amid a coronavirus outbreak. That is a white supremacist argument. To close the borders and shut down travel to the U.S.? What should have gone on is there should have been testing to make sure people weren't coming in sick. And once they came to the U.S. and they were tested and found to have and put under a quarantine and tested, cat. They should have been, put under quarantine if they tested positive and got under quarantine, and the government should have paid for their housing and their food, made sure everything. That's what should have happened. Not shut down the borders and keep people stranded and families separated and all that. Yeah, that's just. I mean, no country shut down the borders. and shut down travel. China did it well in terms of even China. Authoritarian China didn't shut down travel and the borders. What they did was what I suggested. People come into the country, you test them, quarantine them, provide what's needed if they need to stay under a 2-week quarantine or whenever they get rid of the virus. I believe they also did a thing where certain communities could sort of like take responsibility for you, so you could go visit a certain community where maybe you had family, and they basically would people in the community would bring you everything you need, so you could quarantine with your family. I mean, these are smart things to do. Like, listen, I get it. A virus isn't like anything else. There are measures that need to be taken that will essentially affect people's freedom to do whatever the fuck they want. Nothing else should do that, frankly, except for a virus, because there's a virus isn't terrorism. You can't stand up and show how brave you are. Going to public places together as a society to show terrorists you're not scared. That's wonderful against a human being who's a terrorist. A virus doesn't give a shit. Virus, quite frankly, probably if it did have some sort of personality, would be more than happy to see you show it how brave you are, so you would congregate in large crowds and it would be able to spread to as many people as possible. If it was a sentient being. If coronavirus was a sentient being. But yeah, I mean, to shut down travel in the U.S., I mean, holy shit. I mean, wow, Alyssa Milano, way to take that mask off. I mean, there's completely non-white supremacist ways of dealing with this, such as allowing the travel to happen, but just testing and quarantining upon entry. Seems fairly simple and straightforward, and doesn't subject people to being stuck in countries that aren't their home, or their inability to get to a country where they need to escape to. For example, people coming from our southern border whose lives are threatened in other ways. My God. Honestly, just... My dad says, with all the empty rooms in Las Vegas, they painted rectangle boxes in parking lots for social distancing with homeless people. Right. Eminent domain should be used to get homeless in empty hotel rooms. Absolutely. Zoe, tons of empty luxury apartments kept in cities as collateral. Right. What needs to be done in New York, there needs to be a vacancy tax immediately. The most straightforward, this is talking about even past coronavirus. If you have a vacant property for more than, I don't know, a few months, you should be taxed so goddamn much that it'll make you want to drop whatever your rent you're looking for is to a level where you just want to get someone in there who doesn't just afford it. Pernician says the rich have retreated to their yachts, private islands, and New Zealand fortresses where they probably have their own ventilators, right? Zoe says we should seriously ban empty houses while people are sleeping in the streets. My dad says empty condos in Trump Tower owned by Russians and Saudis and rich Americans. Misha says some of the homeless in LA started occupying empty houses. Right. I saw that. Good for them. Gabriella says Matt needs to come back on MR more often. Miss him on there. You gotta tell Sam Cedar that. Last time I was on was in, what was it? Was it early February I was on the show? Wow, it seems like... Was it early February or January I was on the show? And I was the sickest I've been in years, to be honest. I wonder if I had coronavirus. I was honestly, I know, because I was just sick for a few days, so. But I've not been that sick for a very long time. And I still did the show. And it's a good thing I did, because Sam said he'd have me on more, but he didn't. Until now, he definitely won't because of all this going on. I don't even think Michael and Matt Leck and the other guys aren't going into the office right now, right? It's just Sam in that office. Hell, if I was Sam, I would get cable. Because as far as I know, there's no cable in there. Or some sort of YouTube TV or Sling or some sort of television service. And I would just be quarantined in the MR studio. What, Matt Leck was playing video games on the feed today, on the MR feed today? Is that what was going on? Rad Dad says LMAO Bree, as in Brianna, Bernie Sanders' press secretary, has been absolutely tearing Lib Blue Check Twitter apart for the past 3 days. Yeah, she's been really good on Twitter this past few days. I mean, she's always good, but... And of course they're attacking her, yeah, for the stupidest reasons. Grim says Bree is tight with Liz Brunegg and Angela Nage. Listen, there's nothing wrong with Liz Brunegg. I'm sorry, Grim, you're wrong there. Liz Brunegg is good. What's your issue with Liz Brunegg, Grim? Beats Box Dre Beats says China lied, people died. I mean, we lied and people died. The US lied and people died. Listen, China certainly screwed up as well. But even when it came out, we had months, at least 2 months, head start on this, and we did nothing. Nothing. Beatsbox also says, you people are obsessed with white nationalism. It's a tiny problem in the USA, a minority of the population. In terms of overt white nationalists, sure, overall it's a tiny problem. In terms of their rhetoric spreading and influencing policy and important influential figures and people with power, it's a real problem. It's a really big problem, actually. Sam is upstate? Beatsbox looks like he's causing problems in the chat. Thanks, Misha, for taking care of that. Appreciate it. Right. So he says, gotta hand it to them. China lied, people died thingy. Oh, gotta hand it to them. The China lied, people died thingy is quite catchy. It rhymes, which is impressive for them. No one's defending China, Beatsbox. China definitely screwed up. But China's not responsible for all of this. I mean, It's a virus. They didn't create it. I know some conspiracy theorists think they did. But I mean, they didn't make this happen. It was going to happen regardless. Their screw up certainly didn't help in the spread of it. But even then, we could have done something about it when it did come out. Fergal says, Fergal, I don't know. Andrew Cuomo has a sexy pierced nipple. I have seen that picture. It's unclear whether it's actually pierced, but certainly looks like it in that photo, right? Unknown Driller says Antifa are a bigger problem than white supremacy. Excuse you, it's Antifa is a bigger problem than white supremacy, if you want to be grammatically correct. And no, they aren't. Thank you very much. Antifa is good. White supremacy is bad. Viva Antifa, says Grim. Rad Dad says, LMAO, this dude is going to be so disappointed when Matt's just like, LOL, there's some dumb MAGA chud in the chat. That's exactly what I did a little bit earlier, isn't it? Unknown Driller says Matt is a far-left crazy loon who's on the fringes of society. Thank you. What? Sam is doing it from home, the show. Pernician. Yeah, I knew he was doing it from home, but I didn't know he was doing it from the upstate location. Renee says you can call via Zoom. Into the Majority Report? Majority Report is using Zoom right now? No. Miss Heathen says, is Sam at the office? Thought he was recording from home. No, I said if I was Sam, I would quarantine at the office. I didn't say he was. I thought he was doing it from home, but I didn't know he was doing it from upstate. Grimm says Brunig is pro-life and a frequent collaborator with Anna Kachian. Is that the Red Scare, one of the Red Scare girls? I mean, I have no problem with Brunig being pro-life because she doesn't espouse it. I mean, she makes it pretty clear that she personally is pro-life, but she doesn't push it on. Like, she's for choice. That's fine with me. I mean, obviously, in a perfect world, people wouldn't be religious in that aspect and believe that was some sort of religious thing. But I personally really don't have a problem with people who are personally pro-life, yet are completely allies to the pro-choice movement, which, as far as I know, she is. I mean, that's my take on it. Francis Zek says Liz promoted fake health clinics because she's anti-choice. I have not seen that. What did she promote? But yeah, I have no problem with people who are personally pro-life. I mean, I personally don't agree with them, but also they're not pushing policies that hurt that. And if they're allies to pro-choice policies, then that's fine by me. I mean, they just don't have to get abortions. Seems pretty fine. My dad says Sam has kids with him. The kids are staying with Sam, or are they going back and forth, spreading the coronavirus between Sam and Nikki? Nathaniel James says Antifa is just as evil as white supremacy. If you're an idiot, you can say that, I guess. He continues, Antifa are violent and full of soy boys. And by using the term soy boys, you have now outed yourself as someone who's at the very least white supremacist adjacent. David on Periscope says, I can't let go of Tara Reid imploding my head. I'll do an episode on that because I think it's for sure worth talking about. Zoe says they're with Sam. Ooh, Sam's with the kids and doing the show. They do noises. They do noises. His kids are older than mine, though. I think his youngest might be Saul. Is closer and is a little bit close in age to my son Ezra. Ezra is 4, and Saul is 6 or 7, I think. But Mila is in high school right now, right? Yeah, my other kid is 10 months old, so. And as Ryan points out, LMAO, LOLOL, violent, plus soy boys. Pick one, dipshit. Right. You're either violent or you're a little pussy. That's what soy boy is their terminology for, right? I mean, so which one is it? Are you scared of Antifa? Or are they weak to you? Which one is it? I mean, come on. Idiots. Misha says Vietnam has had the best response to COVID. I think I've seen that, right? Right. Zoe says Ezra Klein is your son. Ha ha ha. Very funny. And with that, we're going to call it an episode. Oh wait, my dad says Saul is 7. Ronald Reagan wanted to debate Frozen 2 with him. Yeah, 7. 7's close to Ezra. Ezra's going to be 5 this year. So maybe Saul and Ezra could hang out. That'd be cute. Misha says Antifa is love. Michael on Twitch says, if you're personally pro-life but do not push those views with the intention of changing public policy, functionally, you're pro-choice. Right. Right. That's why I don't mind someone who says they're pro-life personally. Because that is the equivalent. Right. Exactly. Renee says, gotta invite Luna from non-compete on. All right. Sounds good to me. All right, folks. That's the end of the show for today. Let's do some more streams. Let's have some fun. And there'll still be the weekly show, but I'd like to do more. So let's reach out to me if you want to do a few episodes with me. We'll have a good time. We'll talk what's going on in the world. We'll talk about stuff to get our mind off what's going on in the world. Nathaniel James says, you can't just randomly call someone you don't know a white supremacist. I didn't say you were a white supremacist. I said you were at the very least adjacent to, being that you use their terminology. Doesn't mean you're a white supremacist. I mean, maybe you are. I don't know, like you said, which is why I didn't call you one. Piccolo on Twitch says, Binder is who we all have to thank for the relaunching of Gun Girl. Yep. I'll take it. All right, folks. See you all next time on Doomed.